Okay, folks, welcome to today, our part one of our introduction to mapping. It's lovely to have you all here. If you don't know me, my name's Sharon Smith and I'm CWA's Member Support Officer. And today, as I said, we're going to start with session one of this mapping series of 3. As you all know, mapping is essential. It's an essential part of forest planning, whether you're applying for grants, delivering forest operations or planning future programmes. So to have a good understanding of it is essential. To share our knowledge and expertise, we're going to be joined by, or we are joined by Alice Brawley, who is my new CWA colleague. She's our Woodland Officer and she's going to work through these 3 sessions for us. We'll have 2 Q&As throughout the session, throughout today's hour, but if questions arise for you as Alice is talking, please do add them into the chat and we'll address these questions at both of those stopping points today. And at the very end, I'm also going to add a QR code into the session, so have your phones at the ready, just whilst you're, sometimes when you mull things over later, questions come up for you. So if you have anything that you would like to ask us, then please just do that, and then Alice can incorporate that into any the future 2 sessions. So before we begin, if you wouldn't mind if I just share with you a little bit about CWA and who we are and what we do for those who are non-members. Essentially, at the heart of our work is to support our members to achieve their aspirations in their woodlands. We currently have 177 members, most of whom are community groups owning or managing woodlands in Scotland. And the benefits here are on the screen in front of you. We advocate in the political arena on behalf of our members, responding to consultations when they are required. We provide support and advice to communities who are looking to start up community woodland groups, or those of you who are already established. We have Pierce and Alice who work to, and the rest of the team who work to provide that advice in whatever shape or form that might look like. We connect and join the dots for you. So today's session is part of that process. The fact that there was some support around mapping identified in conversations we've had with members, and what we do is we try to provide training to help you learn as you go. We create training sessions, we have exchange visits, and we also have mentoring programs and a fabulous annual conference, which this year is going to be on the 2nd and 3rd of October. So if you'd like to become a member, you can get a discounted ticket price for that conference as well. We do have the professional support, the professional forestry support that Alice and Pierce provide for our members who are able to, as paid advice and consultancy to those groups. And we work in partnership with other strategic partners across Scotland to help make it easier for our communities to be actively involved in their woodland management. If you are not a member, then please scan this code, or I will put in the chat as we progress today the link to join CWA if you would either like to do that as an individual or as a member group. So thanks for your patience here. I'm going to pass you on to Alice. Nice, Alice, if you want to take control of the slides. Fabulous. And I'm just going to mute Jack there just now.
Great. Thanks, Sharon. Yes, so my name's Alice. I think a lot of you will not have met me. I just started working for CWA in October last year. And before that, I was in North Wales working for part-time for the Small Woods Association, and then part-time as a self-employed forestry contractor. And then prior to that, I was working in the Scottish borders with a small forestry company, mainly doing woodland creation schemes for farmers and other landowners, and also working for the Three Hares Community Woodland, which is just outside Midlothian near Edinburgh. Yeah, so I've been in forestry for about 7 years with kind of a eclectic bit of experience, and I also have a master's in GIS, which is relevant to today. So yeah, so mapping is a huge topic, but really important for forestry and for community woodlands. So what I'm going to do today is kind of like start very introductory and talk about what is mapping and how it might be useful for your community woodland group, and then kind of focus in on different mapping platforms that you could use. So it's to try and get you thinking about, what I would suggest as we go through today and between this week and next week, if you think about what type of maps you'd want to create for your community woodland, that's useful. And if you can have a play around with any of the software that I suggest today, that's also useful, because that will be relevant for week 3, which will be me going through 1 or 2 softwares in more detail and kind of advising on how it works. Sorry, the Teams chat keeps popping up whenever someone chats, which I was getting distracted by, but I'll ignore that.
Try and ignore it, Alice. You could close it down and I'll manage it for you just now. I know it's
great. So GIS and mapping, the terminology often gets used quite interchangeably. GIS stands for Geographical Information Systems, and it's basically a very useful and very powerful technology that allows you to collect lots of data, store it in a system, analyze it and kind of manipulate it in different ways, and then like present or like visualize a map output. It's amazing and very useful, and it's used in lots of industries, and it can also be confusing in terms of how to get started. So hopefully today and the next couple of sessions will debunk some of that. In its essence, I guess GIS mapping, it allows you to view geographical data. So an example is Google Maps is an example of GIS. So if you're in a new city and you're trying to find the location of hotels, very easily done. It allows you to map lots of different information. So you might be out in the forest and you want to record like the location of badger sets that you've stumbled upon or where to upgrade fencing. It allows you to do that. It of course allows you to navigate. Again, you might be in Google Maps or Apple Maps, and it allows you to get from point A to B. And it also assists in decision making, which is what it's used a lot in the private industries and also in the academic world. Most industries that you can think of will use GIS in some way. So emergency services obviously use it, businesses use it, transport sector, logistics, utilities, they're all operating different GIS systems on a daily basis. So having some kind of understanding of it, whether it's in relation to your community woodland or like your workplace, is definitely useful, and I would encourage you to do that. Yes, an analog version of GIS, this is what it would have looked like in the past, and I think it's quite a useful way to get you to kind of like understand what a GIS platform is trying to do. So in the past, we would have had separate maps. So there would be like one map, which would be a geology map, and there'd be a separate paper map, which would be a soil map, and then there'd be a separate map, which would be a road network map. And people would go along and get tracing paper and they'd draw over the soil map, and then on the same bit of paper they'd put it over the geology map and draw over, and then they'd also put it over the road network map and draw over, and then they'd get kind of a complicated, often quite messy final output that would allow them to, say, determine where they want to build a new school. That's kind of where GIS started, but you can imagine this was often quite time consuming, and good sites were often missed, and the map would often get cluttered. So nowadays, GIS is almost exclusively digital. So this is a base map, and you can add a layer to it. So this is me adding council boundaries, and then you can add another layer. So this is the core path networks. And then if I decide that this map's then too cluttered, I can then go back and remove that layer just with a click. And then I can add it on again. And then I can add a layer of sites of special scientific interest, for example. And you're basically building up different layers and removing layers and adding layers on to kind of get your final map. But the end goal for you guys, and why mapping is important for community woodlands, mainly is around woodland management. You're going to need to produce maps, or you're going to have to pay someone to produce maps on your behalf for felling licenses or for forestry plans. You might be applying for different grants. These might be Forestry Grant Scheme grants, or there's like a number of other grants that require you to produce maps. Or you might want a map for community engagement. So this might be at the entrance of your woodland as part of like an information sign, or you might want it in a leaflet or as a digital map on the computer, that on your website, for example, that anyone that uses your website can interact with. So for the next few slides, I'm going to go through some map examples that might be relevant to your woodland. And this is to begin to get you thinking about like how your community woodland might want to use maps. And as I go through, I'm also going to focus in on a couple of things that I've included on the maps. And there's kind of like a standard, semi-formal, semi-not formal standardization around map production. And particularly if you're working with Scottish Forestry and you're submitting maps for approval, they'll require you to use kind of like a standard format that we'll go into in more detail next week when we talk about like map production and like how to produce your own maps. So here's an example of a woodland creation map. Hopefully you can see it clearly enough. So this was produced by a forestry company on behalf of a farmer for him to access Forestry Grant Scheme money for new woodland creation. So you can see there's a title at the top right-hand corner. There's a legend. All maps need legends, all maps need titles. You'll note in the legend, I've abbreviated a lot of the species. So SS stands for Sitka spruce and PMB stands for productive mixed broadleafs and so on. And then next to MBL, which stands for native broadleafs, I've got the density. So that's other useful information that's good to include on woodland creation maps. And then there's information about fencing and access points. There's also a north arrow and a scale bar. Then there's the map scale and some information about the map, the base map, which are also good to provide. Map scales are you're kind of encouraged to use the standard scales that we see on paper maps. So that might be 1 to 5,000 or 1 to 10,000 or 1 to 20,000. Yeah. And then there's the main kind of map over here, which details the kind of polygons or the areas in which new trees are going to be planted, and they're color coded. It gives compartment numbers, which is super important and often cross-referenced in the Forestry Grant Scheme application. And then it gives information about planting density as like a note in the top left-hand corner of the map. So you're basically trying to include as much information as possible that makes it useful for whoever's going to be reading your maps, but making it clear and not too cluttered. So yeah, if you're doing a forestry grant application for woodland creation, you often need to include, I don't know, sometimes I've included like 10 maps as part of the application. So yeah, in some cases, lots of, more maps than the happier Scottish Forestry are, I guess, so to say. Another reason why you might want to make maps is for felon licenses. Whenever you submit a felon license, you have to submit at least 2 maps. One of them is the felon map, which shows the area in which you're going to fell. And then one of them is a restock map, which is going to explain how you're going to restock. Yeah. So both of these maps would have legends on either side, quite similar to what was on the last page, but I've just cut them off for this example. And in the top left-hand corner, there's a table with the compartment number and the area. And this can be quite useful to provide just so all the information is in one place. And yeah, whoever's reading the map doesn't need to cross-reference a lot to a Word document. You was also seeing the restock map, some changes have been made. So there's the open ground area, which was where an overhead power line was going in. And I've kind of mapped that, and I would be like making comments on that in the felon license application to kind of justify why I'm doing that and why the restock area is less than what it originally was. So again, you're just trying to provide as much information as possible. This is an example of a harvesting map, maybe not relevant to a lot of community woodlands, but if you are managing contractors for harvesting, maybe you'll be producing these maps yourselves, or maybe you'll get a forestry consultant to do it. But they're very important, and they kind of flag up any hazards, and the idea, I guess, is to reduce the risk. So on this map, we've put utility networks, the INEOS pipeline, which has to have a 50-meter buffer around. And the advice is, if you're working near any INEOS pipeline, to contact them so they know what you're doing. And then water courses, because there's standard practice around working near water courses. So again, useful to just have as much potential hazards on the map as possible. So they're all accounted for. This is an example of a more like community engagement, I guess, like public engagement map. You'll see it's much more attractive than the previous maps we've been seeing, and engaging and user-friendly. And this is what you're much more likely to create if you're making like a leaflet or including a map on your website. This was from Crane Larrick actually, and is downloadable as a printable map from their website. And then a web map. This is, you probably have all seen it, but it's Community Woodlands Association map of all the community woodlands in Scotland, and all these little tree figures you can just click on, and then it pops up a box which gives you information about the community woodland. So these kind of interactive maps, I mean, they're kind of everywhere these days. They're on most websites, and very easy to engage in, slightly more complicated to create, but yeah, a really like interesting and good use of map creation. And then this is a story map. This is quite niche, but quite a unique and often, I think, quite like engaging and fun way to present information to an audience. It's an app that has been created by ArcGIS, and it's been developed so that you can tell a story. So it basically allows you to upload maps, but also texts and images and videos. And you're basically telling a narrative through like visual means. So this is an example of biodiversity hotspot regions, I think it is, in West Africa. And I just wanted to flag this up because I think it's very engaging, and it can be a good way, I guess, to access funding if you're trying to like tell quite a unique story about your woodland. There is a subscription fee with it, so it's a way that so something you have to think about, I guess, if you're applying for grants, you could maybe build in a cost to create this map. And it's quite a fun exercise for community like woodland group members to do. And I think it helps to, I don't know, get people enthusiastic about what they've done in a woodland and like tell their story. So that's a, I guess, very basic introduction to the types of maps you might be wanting to create. I'm going to move on to the different mapping softwares, or some of the different mapping softwares out there. But I just wanted to summarize that, GIS is amazing and powerful, and you can do so much with it. And it's very effective at like providing a visual understanding of data or of maps. Seeing patterns in data allows you to keep information in one place, but it definitely like has its limitations. It needs people to operate it and maintain it. It can't function without, I don't know, people involved, and it definitely doesn't replace local knowledge. So like, maps definitely aren't everything, but they're extremely useful and powerful tools. Does anyone have any questions, or have I missed any questions in the chat relative to what to just that first section?
No questions in the chat so far.
Great. Okay, fab. Well, feel free to throw them all at me at the end, or think about them for next week. Okay, so how do I make a map? Mapping is a huge subject, and normally how it gets taught, if any of you have done like GIS courses, is it kind of goes quite heavy into the technical detail at the start and starts talking about like file formats and vector versus raster and all of that. But I decided to kind of like take a step back and think about software first and making maps first and application, because I think that's more engaging, and then we'll kind of like go back a few steps next week. And also that's what most people said they want support on anyway, so yeah. So there's lots of mapping software out there. This is definitely just a guide, and these are the different softwares that I have personally used, but the list isn't exhaustive. The kind of take-home message is the harder the software is to use, the greater its like capability and flexibility, but the steeper the learning curve. And the easier it is to use, the more basic, and there'll be lots of limitations in terms of what you can do with it, and limitations in terms of like even as basic as just like different color schemes that you can use or different base maps that you can use. So just kind of like have that in the back of your mind when you're thinking about what software to use and like how much time do you want to invest into in map making, and just like experiment and talk to other people and like explore what works best for your woodland. So yeah, I'm mainly focusing on free options. So starting very basic, if all you want to do is locate a point and share this with someone, so this might be the entrance point to your woodland, or the location of a new compost toilet, or a badger set, then you can use you can do that on Google Maps. I think we all know how to use that, but you can also use what 3 words, which I think we're all kind of familiar with these days. But basically every 3 meters square of the world has been given a unique combination of 3 words, and you then send those 3 words to someone, and then that sends them to a direct point. And this is used quite widely by emergency services and for navigation. You can also use the UK grid reference finder, so you can just enter in a postcode and it will spit out a grid reference, a latitude and longitude, and also a what 3 words location for you. I guess the benefit, yeah, that's just super simple. It's not really mapping, it's not really GIS, but it's allowing you to just like share a location with someone and get a good reference. If you want to go above that and like save this location, or if you don't just want to mark a point, but you also want to like mark a line or a polygon. Polygon is used a lot in mapping terminology. It's basically just an area on a map. And we'll go into like points, lines, and polygons next week. But yeah, just think of it as an area on a map for the time being if you're not familiar with it. Then Google My Maps is quite good. So you'll see on this little map here, I've created a red line, which in this example is I've been out into this woodland and I'm surveying it after there's been wind blown. And I've noticed that a bit of the fence has come down. So I've mapped where, while I've been out on site, I've like mapped where this bit of fence needs an upgrade. And then I've also drawn a polygon where there's been a severe bit of wind blow. And I've also marked 2 points because as I was leaving the woodland, I noticed there were 2 badger sets and I want to record them. And then when I come back to the computer, I can open Google My Maps and upload them onto this web application. The benefits of this is it's super simple. It's super like intuitive and familiar, and the simplicity of it is its main advantage. It allows you to measure lengths and areas, which is useful, and access satellite terrain. And you can also link photos to each point, which you can then share with someone else. And you can have multiple users accessing the same map. I guess the main cons is the other side of it being really simple is it's really simple, which yeah, it isn't good enough to export maps, and you can't create maps, so you can't really use it if you're going to be creating maps for a felon license, say. Yeah, but it's really good at recording and saving simple points, lines, and polygons. Now you want to go above the basic plotting and storing of points, lines, and polygons, and you want to also create a map that is of a standard that will be accepted by Scottish Forestry to submit like a felon license or a forest management plan. We want to see if your site is within a SSSI, for example, so you want to be able to like add other data to your map. Or you want to create more complex maps and start like filling in your own forest management plan or filling in your own felon application, then I would suggest My Forest. It is like a web platform. It's very easy to use. It's been created specifically for forestry, so it kind of has most features that you need to use on it. And it's free up to a certain extent. There's certain limitations in the free version, but if you do want to pay for it, it's only £24 per year, I think, per woodland owner. So the fee isn't that high. And one of the first features of My Forest that it excels at is mapping. So you'll see a panel on the left-hand side and then a map on the right-hand side. And again, you're creating points such as a compost toilet, you're creating lines such as a path in the woodland, and then you're creating an area such as the whole perimeter of your woodland boundary. And you can see on the right-hand side is telling you what the area and the lengths are, which is all information that you need if you're going to be populating a forest management plan, for example. You can change the colours, which is quite easy to do, and you can move points quite easily, and it's quite intuitive. And then you can also create compartments and create subcompartments, which is an important part of any forest planning and is kind of like a standard way in the industry to divide up a forest. Yep. So that's mapping. That's like one feature of My Forest. And you can also, you can see on the left-hand side under panels, it says map. And in the left-hand side in the panel section, you can see maps and location map, and you can basically create a series of maps that you can then export as a PDF, and these will be of high enough quality for Scottish Forestry. Yeah, so very useful. The second feature of My Forest, which is very relevant to community woodland groups, is that it allows you to create a forest management plan or a felon application within the app, and then you then export it and then you submit it to Scottish Forestry. So it's basically taking the template that Scottish Forestry needs you to fill in and then uploaded it into their web app in a kind of like more accessible and like slightly more user-friendly way. So it kind of like walks you through all the sections that you need to input, and you can do them in a kind of like popcorn effect order. So you can like fill in your management plan details, such as your business reference number and your location. And then you can kind of hop down to the vision and objectives section and start to fill that in. And then you can go like back to the details section, and it's, yeah, kind of like guiding you through the whole process, which is very useful. Yeah, so My Forest is great. When I worked for the Small Woods Association, they were actually like, yeah, working quite actively with a lot of small woodland owners to encourage them to use My Forest. I think if you've never done mapping before, it can be a bit confusing. And if you don't know anything about mapping, it can be like a little bit of a steep learning curve. But it's much easier than QGIS, and it allows you to produce maps of like a high standard. So I definitely recommend My Forest as kind of like a place to start if you're like a novice and need to create a lot of maps. QGIS is the next one. A lot of you might have heard of QGIS. It's kind of commercial professional equivalent is ArcGIS, which is quite expensive for a license each year. So QGIS is free and open source and is what a lot of community groups or environmental organizations use. It's an amazing bit of software and very powerful, and it will allow you to create maps, like all the maps that you need. It allows you to like host a lot of different data layers. It gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of base maps, and it allows you to store and kind of like manipulate data very effectively. But there's quite a steep learning curve, so I just wanted to kind of like show you what it looks like, I guess, in picture format. So if anyone does want to start using it, then I guess maybe I'd encourage you to look at YouTube videos and see if you can sign up to a basic QGIS course. There's quite a lot out there, and start playing about with it yourself. It's kind of like a new computer game. If you don't know where to click, you don't know where to click, and you kind of get overwhelmed. But once you get more familiar with it, it is quite intuitive, I think. So this is what the kind of home page looks like. You've got the toolbar at the top, which is where most of your commonly used tools will be. Tools basically mean anything that allows you to kind of play with the map or the data. So there's the hand, which allows you to pan about. There's zoom buttons that allow you to zoom in and out. There's like an identify button that allows you to like click on features on the map and they'll tell you what they are. There's like a measuring tool. There's lots of tools that you can play about with. The layer panel on the left-hand side. So you'll see it kind of has a similar layout to My Forest, where there's the panel on the left-hand side and then there's the map on the right-hand side. That's quite a like standard structure to a lot of like GIS platforms. The layer panel basically just shows you all the data layers that you've uploaded, and it allows you to like toggle or switch them on and off and move them up and down so the different layers are above or below each other. You have your map canvas, which is kind of the central place where maps and layers are displayed. You can also interact with this by like zooming in and out and like clicking on features. And then you have your browser panel at the bottom, which allows you to search for and add data. You have the coordinates and scale bar on the right-hand side. So an advantage of QGIS is you can upload different base maps. So here's an example of OpenStreetMap and then satellite imagery. You can create polygons very easily. But the main difference to My Forest is that you can be quite adventurous, so to speak, with your symbology. And so say for Scots pine and mixed broadleaf mix, you can kind of, I guess, reflect that it's not just a single species by creating like a stripy pattern or adding dots. Lots of layers. So My Forest, in My Forest, you wouldn't be able to add this layer. This is the soil map of the UK. It's a very large data set. But in QGIS, you can just add it as a layer, and then it kind of gives you an indication of the soils of your woodland. And then you can, the number of layers that you can add are kind of unlimited. So here is an example of the timber transport routes, which I've overlain on the map, which is useful to know, obviously, if you're managing your forest, how you're going to extract your timber. So the main pros are that you can like upload a huge amount of data, you can store lots of files, and these files can be like quite easily shared amongst your organization and like stored on the computer for a very long time. And there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what you can do, from like symbology to kind of like complex statistical analysis or whatever. But a lot can go wrong with QGIS at the start, and it can be like quite frustrating, and often you can be in the wrong coordinate system and you don't know why. or you can lose all your data and you don't know why. So when I studied GIS, I remember walking into my like supervisor's office and he was just like screaming at his computer because the software had just crashed and he just lost half a day of work and he didn't understand why. So yeah, very powerful but very frustrating sometimes. And YouTube is your best friend pretty much. Yeah. So they were all web applications, i.e. like mapping software that you can do on your laptop, which is often, yeah, a lot easier than doing it on your phone. But particularly in terms of forest management, often you're out in the forest and you want to be able to map on site. So Avenza is an app and one of the ways in which you can do it. Avenza is widely used in forestry by a lot of contractors. So yeah, I guess that places it as a software that I would suggest you use because a lot of people use it. It works without any signal. It allows you to like leave breadcrumb trails, they're called. So if you're wanting to map a new path that you're creating through your woodland, you can just select a button on the app and it will kind of record your route without you having to do anything on it. Kind of looks like this. So imagine this is my phone. So the app comes with a lot of base maps, so you don't need to do this, but what I tend to do is I create a map in either QGIS or MyForest, and I export it and then I upload it to MyForest. So this is actually, when I'm on the app, this is what I'm seeing. And this map is georeferenced, so when I'm on this site, it will come up with like a little blue dot showing my location. And as I walk around the woodland, when I get to a feature that I want to map, it will show me exactly where I am, and it's easy to do that. So in this map, these are just like a series of points. I think I was surveying the woodland. And when I mark a point, then this box pops up and it allows me to add a title for the point. It allows me to add a description. And maybe one of the most like important features is it allows me to add a photograph. And then that photograph is georeferenced to that location. And at the end of the day, I've created all these points. I've created different polygons because I decided to section the woodland into different compartments while I was there. And then when I export all the data, it also exports all the photos, even though they're kind of like held on your phone, but it kind of does it all in one sweep. And then I can just send that to a colleague or whoever, or myself. And then when I go on the computer, all the photos will be there. So it's very easy to use and yeah, pretty intuitive as well. I guess one of the main limitations is that you can only have 3 maps at a time. Yeah, but that's never been a big issue for me. It kind of keeps the data, but doesn't keep the map. So you just need to like delete them. But as long as you send them to yourself, then you can have access to them on the computer through a different mapping application. So yeah, I'd really recommend Avenza. Yeah, so that's most of the platforms that I'm going to go through today. There's lots of paid options out there. I'm going to assume then of less relevance to community woodland groups. But I just wanted to introduce you to a couple in case they are useful. Most of the paid options, I guess the advantage of them is that they tend to come in like an app format and they tend to come with support. So if you get stuck, then there's someone who you can email or message and they'll help you. Yeah, I guess that's one of the main advantages. And they also tend to be like a bit simpler, a bit more intuitive, a bit more user-friendly. So here's some examples. The Land app. It's useful for measuring and mapping, and it also, I think, has a lot of layers in the app already. So it will have information such as like council boundaries or environmental constraints, such as like sites of special scientific interest. And so, yeah, that having that information might be really useful while you're out in your woodland. Merging Maps is a app that works with QGIS, a bit like QField. It allows you to, again, collect data, photos, and information. I found it not super intuitive, but I know other people that really love it. There's the Fields Area Measure app. This is used a lot by farmers, actually, to simply like measure areas and perimeters and distances. But it's quite expensive, about £30 a month, and you can kind of do that for free in Avenza. So I've always just ended up using, Avenza. And then OTISS, this is used a lot by tree surveyors, and it's kind of set up in a way for you to kind of survey and like input information relative to individual trees. But you'll see they all come with about, I guess, £150 a year price tag. So again, if you're thinking about using a paid version for a particular project, it's useful to think about the kind of like long-term plan. And like, if you got funding to pay for a paid version for 1 year, are you going to get that next year? And like, kind of what's your backup plan like going forward? So in terms of applications, in summary, there's a lot out there. This list, isn't exhaustive, but I'd recommend using Google My Maps if you just need to plot and store like very, very basic data. Avenza if you want to start recording on your phone or on a tablet while out in the woodland. MyForest if you want to produce maps that are of a standard to send to contractors or to apply for grant schemes that are going to be like approved by Scottish Forestry, or if you want to start like populating your own woodland management plan or your own fenland license. And then QGIS if you're like really into mapping and you potentially want to like use it in a job, or you're like excited or enthusiastic about creating like, I don't know, very great maps for your community woodland, or having like very neat like data storage and like being a bit more flexible with what you can do with it. And then I guess also you can contract out map making. You don't need to learn it yourself, and there's a lot of people that can do it, and that is also an option. So that's most of what, that's kind of all of what we're going to cover today. Next week, but I'm up for this schedule being altered based on any feedback you have, but I'm going to introduce some kind of key mapping terminology and try make some of the more complex words less overwhelming or unfamiliar. Introduce vector and raster data types, and introduce different file formats that can be useful if you're kind of like exporting maps or sending maps to other people. And then go on to talking about basic map making, and where to access key data such as the soil map that I referenced, or where to download timber transport network or whatever, all that information. Any questions? And don't forget to unmute if you do have any.
There's none in the chat. Christine, your hand's up and you come.
Sorry, just had to unmute myself. That was really fascinating. Thank you. I just had a quick question about copyright. I'm always terribly nervous about copyright. I used to work in publishing, and know what are the issues with these different maps you've shown us? Is there like a license to just use internally, or can you put them on a website, or could you print them on an interpretation board, or does it depend with each format? Maybe that's something you'll come to in a future session.
Yeah, I'm happy to go into that more next week as well, because it is confusing. MyForest, I think all the maps that you export, I think they might have their logo on it, and I think the base maps are what's the right word? I think they have copyright to the base maps, so as long as you reference them, then that's okay. With QGIS, it's a bit more complicated. You don't need to worry about, as far as I know, you don't need to worry about referencing the data that you use, but the base map you do. So on QGIS, you can freely upload Bing Maps and Google Satellite Maps, but you're not allowed to include them in maps that are of commercial use unless you have a license. So if we're making maps on behalf of an organization, we often buy the Ordnance Survey tile for that particular woodland, which is why a lot of the maps that I showed you in terms of the woodland creation ones and the felon license ones don't look that exciting or engaging, is because they're the Ordnance Survey maps. They're very fit for purpose, and you buy a license for the tile. But you need to get a license if you want to commercially include like any base map, basically.
And
but there's free versions available as well.
A separate negotiation with the Ordnance Survey then, or does the individual application you're working with, would that kind of guide you through? I mean, I wouldn't know where to start with getting an OS tile. I mean, it's a new phrase to me. You know, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I can cover that next week. Basically, there's a lot of companies that sell them, and you just choose a company and you tell them which tile you want and you buy it from them, and it costs about £20 per tile, and then you have license to that tile for a year. But that's only relevant if you are using QGIS. If you are making maps in, say, My Forest, then they kind of have covered the licensing of the base map for you.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, great, thank you.
Great information, Alice. I'm loving this. I've learned so much today. It's great. Anyone else got any questions whilst we've got her? Jack, can you come? Do you want to ask the question?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Yes. I'm doing this session for two reasons. One, I've got a 9-acre garden, some of which I know is ancient woodland, and I want to try and get all that sorted and defined for people for generations to come. I'm also connected with Comrie Community Woodland, which is about a mile south of my house, across the valley. And if you actually go to that website, which I think is ccw.cap21.org.uk, the photograph there was actually taken by my drone from above my house, of the woodland a mile away. Now, could I use that photograph to actually be the basis of a map?
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
And there's no copyright problems.
Yeah, you can. That's a lot easier to do now. You used to have to kind of like manually, like the drone will take lots of photographs and you used to have to manually stitch them together. But now you can basically just like input it into a software and they'll do it for you. And then you upload that into like QGIS. I think you'd have to upload it into QGIS and then make a map from there. I think any of the other softwares that I mentioned today wouldn't allow you to do that. Yeah, but that's possible.
Great, thanks.
Alice, we've in fact we've not even discussed this, but we did ask it when people signed up for the course, was that we would create a WhatsApp group for our members who have attended today. So we'll do that over the next couple of days, Alice, yeah, and we'll get that pulled together. And if you have any questions, that if you're having a shot or whatever and you come across a question, then please just jump into the WhatsApp group as well, and that you can reach out and support each other by all means through that group too. That just then becomes an ongoing place where if you're doing a little bit of mapping, then you can reach out and hopefully somebody will respond.
Yeah, the idea behind the WhatsApp group is that sometimes when you're starting mapping, you do just need someone to like tell you where to click or like where to get a bit of data, and that can be quite time consuming to do yourself, but quicker if someone just shows you. Yeah, but at the same time, there can be like, if you're just starting out, you can have a lot of questions. So we're going to experiment with how the WhatsApp group works, and if having it to kind of like ask quick fire questions works, or if that doesn't feel actually like enough support, or if people, or if I or anyone else isn't responding in time and it's not actually functioning. So it's, yeah, a bit of an experiment.
That's just a couple of questions about recordings. So I'm recording it. I will hopefully tomorrow manage to get this edited, and then I have to give it to my colleague Jen to upload onto YouTube. And once I have that link, I will send it out to you all as soon as I can. We don't always work the same day, so it might be early next week, I'm afraid. Yeah, and conference, not confirmed yet, Christine, but looking for the West Coast on the 2nd and 3rd of October. Anything else, folks? Oh, I'm going to put in the, Alice, could you move the slide along for me, please, if you wouldn't mind? So if you do have any questions, anything that you have mulled over post today and you're not quite sure, you'd maybe like to raise it so that just to double check that Alice can cover it next week, please just click on either the link in the chat, or if you want to take a wee scan of the QR code on the screen, and then just drop your thoughts, questions, comments into there. It's just your name, your email, and whatever you want to ask or say, and then that can come back to us, and we've got some insights from today's session, what you've taken from it, to be able to feed it into next Thursday's session. Alice, you did that in brilliant time, and the audience were so well behaved that we've actually managed to finish early. So thank you all very much indeed for your time today, for joining us, and we look forward to hearing if you've got any thoughts, and if not, looking forward to session 2 next Thursday.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alice.
Bye.